Hello, and well done for surviving the
Hello there.
that was the Tiger King. Now, I really enjoyed the documentary Tiger King. Me and my sister binged it all in one day. We found it very entertaining, really bizarre, and I think the documentary knew what it was doing by playing up to the oddness of the characters in the show. If you haven't seen the actual documentary, I'm sure you've heard about it, or seen the memes of, or read a news article about, or heard a celebrity talking about the Tiger King. Cardi B recently came out saying that she wants to start a GoFundMe page to free Joe Exotic because she believes he was framed. But this video is going to be about kind of trying to dispel all of the crazy fuss that's been around him, because at the end of the day, he's not a good man. He did commit crimes, and a lot of those crimes were towards the animals that he has in his roadside zoo. There were loads of other private zoo owners that were in the show, and obviously you had Carole Baskin, an owner of a sanctuary, and I'm also going to be talking about them too because they weren't all innocent. Right, so let's get started.
$2,000 years later.
What's so tired? And all you animal rights people. Is that how he talks? Was that a good impression? And all you animal rights. I hate Carole Baskin.
AAA member. Hell, I'm even a magician.
Hell, I'm even a magician. Hell, I'm even a magician.
On top of all of this, I own a zoo.
On top of all of this, I own a zoo. Okay, that's enough with the impressions. Right, so let's talk a bit about Joe. Now, I understand the craziness and obsession that's going on with him because he's such a meme-worthy guy, but I really want to bring back into the limelight the awful things that he did. So obviously if you've watched the documentary you would have seen it, but like I said, because he was framed at the end and because of the way the documentary made the show about him, you kind of forgive his sins because you want to like him. Now in the show it concentrated a lot on the cub petting side of Joe's business, and I think obviously this is a really good thing because the cub petting industry is such a dangerous and such a sad one. To have cub petting zoos means that you need to constantly have cubs in order to profit, because you can only really show cubs legally in America between the ages of 8 weeks and 12 weeks. After they surpass 12 weeks, they just become a liability and another mouth to feed at your private zoo. And according to figures, it costs around $10,000 to feed one tiger. So this means that Joe is constantly breeding these tigers. You even see it in the documentary. A tiger cub is born and he's just pulling it with a stick, and he's doing it really harshly as well. The reason they take these cubs so early from their mothers is because it puts the mother back into heat really quickly, meaning that she can now reproduce another cub or another litter, just to be stolen from her again. The tiger mother doesn't even get to lick her cubs clean. It's really sad, this industry of breeding, because these cubs will never be able to breathe wild air. They're not even taught how to behave like a tiger from their mothers. They're not taught how to play. They're not taught how to eat, how to hunt. So they can never be released into the wild. As soon as Joe takes them from the mother, they are reared by him, they are bottle fed by him, and then they go on and to be fed expired processed meat from Walmart that not only the animals ate, but apparently the workers at the zoo had to eat as well. There was a study done to show that animals that are given this kind of food over food that they would eat in the wild, such as a full carcass, show behaviours that don't fit the animals that they could be in the wild. Apparently they don't even chew their food properly. Another thing that Joe constantly breeds are a subspecies called liger. Now what these are is when you have a male lion and a female tiger mate and produce a liger. These animals never occur in the wild. They simply can't, because lions and tigers don't even live in the same area in the world. So they would never meet and they would never breed. The only reason that zoo owners such as Joe Exotic and Doc Antle would ever breed these animals is because they grow to such a large size and are a great attraction for their zoo, meaning more money for them. Now, some studies show that ligers can suffer from something called gigantism, and this means that they'll never stop growing because they're not supposed to be alive. Gigantism can mean that they have very sore joints, they develop a lot of health issues later on in life. There was a newspaper article that I'll link down below that shows a lot of the ligers visited all couldn't even move from how large and massive they become. And people like Joe and Doc Antle continue to water down the bloodline by breeding them with more lions or more tigers. Now, the male ligers are sterile. They can't even reproduce. So, for example, if you've ever heard of a mule that's a cross between a horse and a donkey, they can't breed either. They are also sterile. It's just really unfortunate that these animals keep being bred for absolutely no conservational value. They don't affect genetic diversity of these animals because, like I said, they just do not occur in the wild. The only reason they are ever made is as a money-making machine. And they suffer with health issues that they just have to bear because there's nothing else they can do. Now, at the end of the show, you find that 5 tiger carcasses are found on the park, buried. Joe said that he euthanized them. I find this to be BS. Joe had enough money to spend tens of thousands of dollars on creating his TV show, Joe Exotic TV. He had money when he wanted to run for governor and then for president. It doesn't make sense to me that he can't afford to hire a vet, simply just to look at the animals, see if they need to be euthanized, and then euthanize them in a way that's as painless as possible. No, he decided to do it himself by shooting them in the head. Apparently this wasn't even the only time that Joe tried to euthanize the animals. He tried to euthanize 10 other tigers before, but his staff stopped him because they developed such a strong connection with them and they just didn't want to see these animals die. Like I said before, Joe constantly was breeding tiger cubs, and according to the workers at the zoo, they often went missing. I think we can all guess what happened to those. No one told him he had to choose to keep these animals. If you're taking these animals on, you are taking on that responsibility of feeding them, providing for them, making sure that they are safe and healthy, and constantly getting them checked up by vets. If you can't afford to do that, simply just don't get the animals. I don't understand where the difficulty here is. Joe later comes out and says that he is entitled to euthanize his property. I mean, when you have a man that thinks in this way, that thinks of these animals as his property and something that he's allowed to euthanize because he bought them, I guess there's nothing really that you can say to someone like that. Now, this video is supposed to concentrate on the animal side of things, but I can't help but mention some of the things that Joe did to other humans as well, because that's what the documentary focused on so much in the show. Now, Joe is an openly racist man. He's not ashamed to say that he is. You see that Shaquille O'Neal visited the zoo to, go pet some tiger cubs. But apparently when Shaq went to visit the zoo, Joe didn't even know who he was. So he turns to one of his employees and goes, "God damn, did you see that big?" And then proceeds to call Shaq the N-word. What can I say? I wasn't even that surprised. I think it's disgusting that such an openly racist man can gain so much following and so much attention and so much support from the general public. Obviously, the documentary didn't actually show any of these things, and they came out and said that it didn't fit their storyline. I find this hard to believe. They showed a lot of things that I would have found somewhat irrelevant. They really focused on the Carole feud. There were several times they could have put that in there and I think it wouldn't have seemed out of the blue. There's even this video, which I'll put up now.
What's going on here in this country? It's absolutely pathetic. I can't say the N-word, but you can get on YouTube and watch any black man's rap video and they're calling each other the N-word. What the hell? Is this discrimination? I'm white, I can't say the N-word and they can't?
I think it's very obvious why a black rapper can say it, Joe, but you can't. Now, in the show, you see the producer of the original TV show that was going to be made about Joe called The Tiger King, talking about all of the things that he experienced when he was on the GW Zoo filming things for the reality show. You later see that all the footage is burnt down when there was an arson attack on the building where all of his equipment was kept and where 2 baby alligators were kept. Joe says that the producer did this because Carole paid him, I think it was $10,000 or $20,000 to do it. This producer was set to make a lot more money than that from this show. The producer says that Joe actually did it because he had a lot of incriminating evidence against Joe, and Joe felt that he could make his own TV show like he was doing already now that he had learned all the tips and tricks from the producer. So Joe was very happy to sacrifice these 2 baby alligators in order to save face from all of the footage that was filmed by the producer. At the end of the day, I really don't think we should be standing a man that has such a careless disregard for animals, for his fellow humans. He didn't even pay his workers. He left them in squalid conditions. He let them eat expired food. He constantly misgendered Saf. He was racist. He kept his husbands addicted to drugs so that they would stay with him. This is not someone that we should stand. This is not someone that we should want to free from prison. He very clearly wanted Carole dead and was happy to go to any length to murder her. So that's the first bit about Joe Exotic. Done. I think it suits me. Tash all off. Time for part 2, where we talk about Carole Baskin. Right. Okay, this is my best attempt at flower crown. I don't think I did too badly, especially considering that I had about 5 minutes to make this. Okay, let's talk about Carole Baskin. Now, Carole Baskin and the feud with her and Joe was focused on a lot in the show, and I think it was really interesting that they drew comparisons between what Carole was doing, between what Joe was doing. They constantly said, oh, you know what, how come Carole gets to keep her animals in a cage but Joe doesn't? Why is it so different when the two of them do it? Carole gets to invite people to come and look at her animals and pay and charge them money, and doesn't pay any workers, she just has volunteers. Why is it okay when she does it but it's not okay when Joe does it? And I'm here to kind of talk about why there was a slight difference in what they were doing. Reading into Carole's life and reading more about her diary that was released to Joe, you see that she really did have a conflict with her husband Dan that ended up dying, that Joe accused her of killing. In that Dan wanted to breed the tigers and the lions and the bobcats that they had at the park and sell them because he understood how much money can be made by doing this, whereas Carole really wasn't happy with breeding them. She didn't want to do that. She felt it cruel to breed animals that would spend the rest of their lives in cages. This is one major difference between Carole and Joe. Joe was happy to breed these animals. He fell into kind of like a downward spiral where he needed money, so he kept breeding tigers, but that meant he had to spend more money when they later became not profitable and he just had to feed them. Carole was opposed to breeding, as was Joe in the beginning, actually. I do want to point that out. Joe apparently at the beginning really wasn't happy with breeding. He also didn't like the idea of animals being kept in cages for their whole lives. And this changed when Joe realised how profitable that could be. Like I said before, tigers that are bred in captivity, lions that are bred in captivity, they lack so many skills that are required to survive in the wild that even if you try, they probably would not survive in the wild. This is a really sad reality of all of these animals. So Carole really wanted to end that, and she had a plan that she wanted to end breeding, sale and public display of big cats by 2025. However, in this she also included zoos, which is another issue. I think especially as zoology students we're taught a lot that zoos definitely have a lot of negatives, but they also have a lot of positives. And a lot of the certified zoos, especially here in England, they have conservation at the forefront of what they're trying to do. And zoos can provide a lot of education to the public, and this can help in the long term when it comes to conservation and trying to fundraise in order to protect our wildlife. But the end message is that she does not breed any of her animals. If they happen to recreate naturally, there's nothing really that she can do to stop that, but she doesn't force them to breed the same way that Joe did. The second thing was that she had a zero-touch policy. The main thing that you see in Doc Antle's and Joe Exotic Zoo is that they encourage people to come and touch the lions. This is the main way they make their money. I think Doc Antle said that he can make up to $700 for a tour of his zoo and then a session with a baby tiger. This is really dangerous behaviour, like we mentioned before. It encourages zookeepers to breed, but this is also really dangerous for the cubs because they can work 10-hour days where they are passed from person to person, and it's very stressful for them. They're without their mothers, they don't know what's going on, they really had no proper introduction into who they are as animals and how to behave, so being passed around from human to human can be very stressful for these young cubs. Whereas Carole does not have this practice at her sanctuary. She only takes in animals that have been abandoned or that people cannot care for anymore. I think recently she said that she stopped taking in animals because it encourages people like Joe to continue to breed cubs, and then as soon as they're not profitable anymore, that he can just give them away. They're not his problem anymore. There was like a large conspiracy, you know, that Carole killed her husband, you know, for the will and for the inheritance. As soon as she got this money from the will, she spent it on knocking down the enclosures that she had on the property and building much bigger ones. So you can see that at the forefront of her mind was that she wanted to help these animals. She did not come across well in the documentary, which I think was done on purpose, like I said, to play up to the oddness of the characters. Her main goal was to stop the breeding of animals, which, you know what, she ended up doing. There were a few journalists that went onto her sanctuary and saw that it was kind of run down, that the cages weren't in the best condition, but I think you have to keep intentions in mind here, and from what I've read and from the research that I've done, I think I can safely assume that Carole has good intentions when it comes to the animals. Alright, that's the end of The Flower Queen. Time to talk about Doc Antle. Okay, I think that's a pretty good Doc Antle. So, let's get started. Now, the thing about Doc Antle is, since the documentary has come out, he's come out against Netflix and said that they didn't concentrate on his charitable side of his business. So, I decided to. I looked into it, and he has a charity called the RSF, or the Rare Species Fund. And I went onto their website, and on their website there is just lists and lists of all of these NGOs and charities that he says that he's funded projects for or that he supports. Now, there was a journalist that went onto his park, and apparently when you buy the tickets, he does this whole spiel about, oh, you've just helped conservation because we donate part of our profits to charity. And to charity, he means his RSF charity. Now, I was curious about how much he actually donates, so I managed to find his tax forms that he fills out for RSF, which I'll put up on screen now. I looked into them for 5 years, and if you go down to the part where he breaks down how he spends the money that he's donated to the charities, you see that yes, he does donate to organisations in America, to organisations out of America, but you see that he spends around half of the money from his charity on his own zoo. Now, I found this quite bizarre. You see here that he spends it on feeding the animals and on fixing the enclosures for the animals, which I think is actually quite strange. Why would you have to do it through a charity? And then I remembered that charities are tax exempt, so it seems like what he's doing is, through his charity, is doing things actually for his own zoo, which end up helping his profit, and he does it through his charity maybe to claim back taxes. I'm not sure about the legality of this. I'm not sure about the structure of taxes in the IRS in America, but that's just what it seems like to me. If you have any idea, maybe leave it in the comments down below. I thought this was bizarre. Like I said, in the tax forms, you do see that he does donate money to charities. It's just that the sheer volume of them on his website seems that he can't actually donate that much to each charity that he has. I will link the RSF website down below. Doc Antle does a lot of the same things that Joe does. And I think, like I said, everything that we hold Joe accountable for, we should hold Doc Antle accountable for. He also does cub betting. He also breeds ligers. To give it to Doc Antle, he does at least feed his tigers real meat. He doesn't feed them expired meat from Walmart. But, I mean, this doesn't make up for everything else that he does. I don't want to say that these people hate animals, because it's hard. When you see them, when you see the documentary, you see that they do have some kind of love for animals. Maybe it comes out in the wrong way. I understand that when you love animals so much, you just want to touch them, you want to hug them, you want to form a bond with them and a close relationship with them. But this isn't necessarily the best thing that's for them. Animals do not really benefit from forming a bond with humans in the same way that we benefit, maybe mentally or spiritually. They deserve to be in the wild. They don't deserve to be bred and kept in cages for the rest of their lives. And I think this needs to be concentrated on. We can't just forgive these people for this practice. And apparently it only costs around $40 to gain a license to display animals in America. All you need to do is fit the bare minimum of requirements, so in terms of shelter and in terms of knowledge that you have on these animals, and that's it. You are entitled to have a roadside zoo or a menagerie. This is a huge injustice in terms of the American government. I know that there are loads of senators that are looking into this. I know, like, Bernie Sanders, for example, endorsed a new act that would close this loophole of people that know absolutely nothing about animals opening up their own zoos. There are so many stories of animals in roadside zoos that are treated so badly. They're malnourished, they can't even move, they have open sores and boils. This is no way that animals should be treated. It's not fair that this is continuing to be a thing. I think hopefully the Tiger King documentary can shed some light on this and push people in America to really question if going to these zoos is the right thing to do, if they are actually funding the abuse of these animals, the neglect of these animals. Loads of these zoo owners end up not being able to afford to continue to run the zoos, so they either leave and abandon the animals, and the animals are left without food and drink. And I think it's such a sad reality of all of these animals that are constantly being bred. There was a figure that says that there's more animals in captivity in America than there is in the wild. We need to change this. We should be concentrating on conservation in the wild. There's no reason to constantly breed them in America. I think Doc Antle says, what we're doing is conservation. We're breeding them, we're keeping the animals alive. That's actually not the case. What animal breeders like Doc and Joe do is they mix together loads of subspecies. So they would breed a Sumatran tiger with a Bengal tiger, and they just continue to water down the subspecies to the point where they're just tigers that are mixed from loads of different backgrounds. And these serve no purpose in conservation because, like I said, they will just be animals that are kept in captivity for the rest of their life, but there aren't even really subspecies. They are just a mix of loads of species. For example, zoos, licensed zoos here in the UK, around the world, in America, they only breed pure forms of tigers. So, for example, they'd only breed a Bengal with a Bengal or a Sumatran with a Sumatran. And this conserves their bloodline, this conserves the subspecies, and it doesn't mix them together, and it doesn't play around with them just so they can get beautiful colours like white tigers that Doc Antle is so obsessed with. I hope this video has taught you all something, and maybe you'll look at everything differently now. I hope the memes continue. The memes are great. I love them. I don't think we should be thinking about freeing Joe Exotic. I think he clearly wanted Carole dead. He committed the crimes that they accused him of committing. There's a nice little recording of Joe at the end saying, "I understand how the animals felt now. I would never keep an animal in a cage again." And I think that's part of the silver lining that we can look, that hopefully Joe has changed his outlook on how he treats his animal. He's also suing the government for making tigers an endangered species so that he can't sell them anymore. I think he's suing them for like $94 million. So has he really changed his ways? I don't know, but do I think that we should be concentrating on freeing him? Definitely not. Well, thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a thumbs up and a comment and subscribe, and yeah, I hope you all have a lovely quarantine.